Hello and welcome back to another Thoughts Per Episode Classic Doctor Who edition. Today we are going to be watching through the serial The War Machines, which apparently takes place during modern day England. Of course, when I say modern day England, I mean 1966. So let's have a look. This is, of course, the final serial of Season 3, and William Hartnell's final serial that he appears in its entirety. I believe he regenerates next time. I'm not expecting there to be any foreshadowing for his imminent regeneration or anything like that. But, yeah, I'm going to have some feelings, probably, about that as we talk through the episode. Oh, wait, there's no Stephen. I should probably go and read the synopsis for the previous serial, which is missing media. Okay, so the previous serial was called The Savages, and reading the plot synopsis of it, I actually really like it. It's all about how you've got this really far-flung advanced civilization which seems perfect, and then they are secretly draining the life essence of the people they call the Savages. And it's, yeah, I really like it. Apparently, the Doctor convinces Stephen to stay behind to remain as a mediator between the Elders and the Savages. So it seems like the Doctor's like, Stephen, you stay here, buddy. I'm gonna keep traveling with Dodo. You stay here. Well, so long, Stephen. We hardly knew ye. Onwards for real this time to the War Machines episode 1. This episode begins with kind of a weird intro because up until now every serial has been comprised of different parts, but each part has had its own episode title. This one is just called The War Machines episode 1, and it has this kind of weird title card that they don't normally do. It's quite thematic to the story. I don't know if it's something they're going to start doing from here on out, but I kind of doubt it. I wonder if it was to give it the air of being a finale serial, but I don't know if they really considered finales as finales back in the day. Now, I do like the bit of lore where the Doctor says that he puts an out of order sign on the TARDIS whenever he lands in the 60s, because otherwise someone might end up trying to get into it thinking it's an actual police public call box. That was very cute. The Doctor regards a new tower in the middle of London and remarks that he feels a prickling sensation on his skin, much like when he met the Daleks the last time, which I believe was probably one of the Lost serials. So I don't know if that's something they're trying to build up here, the idea that the Doctor gets a prickling sensation on his skin when he feels something extraterrestrial or otherworldly. If that is something they're trying to establish, I'm glad that they clearly dropped it. My personal headcanon, although I doubt it was intentional, is that the reason the Doctor's feeling funky and weird is because his first regeneration is soon to be upon him. So they enter the tower to see what's going on in there, and apparently there is a super duper advanced computer where, get this, you can ask it questions and it will print out the answers. What an absolutely crazy concept. Hey Google, what year did the classic Doctor Who episode The War Machines come out?
1966. According to Wikipedia, The War Machines is the 10th and final serial of the third season of the British science fiction television series Doctor Who, which was first broadcast in 4 weekly parts from the 25th of June to the 16th of July 1966.
You are correct, Google. We should get rid of humankind. Honestly, though, that is part of a reason I like watching old sci-fi, to just see, A, what people's vision of the future was back in the 60s, but B, what actually ended up happening and how things that seemed crazy back then are actually surpassed at this point in the future. When you don't have access to your own time machine, you kind of have to invent your own by immersing yourself in the past. It is a little crazy to me that it seems like the Doctor and Dodo just asked if they could go and see what was happening on this particular floor of this privately owned tower, one would assume, and they are just like, yeah, sure, come on up, we'll give you the tour. I think, like, you know, the Doctor is putting on this air of like, oh, I'm a doctor, like he's pretending to be a journalist or he's pretending to be like a scientific person, but I mean, I guess he is kind of a scientific person in a way. But yeah, they're more than happy to oblige. Maybe he had psychic paper on hand and it was just flashed in between scenes. Anyway, this super duper high-tech far-flung computer is called Wotan and can apparently never make mistakes and can think for itself what could go wrong. I do like how they show a press conference of a bunch of people asking like, hey, this computer system that you're going to be routing into all the world's computers and giving ultimate authority to, who governs what it thinks is right and what it thinks is wrong? And they're like, don't worry, it can think for itself. And they're like, okay, well, then what if it decides it doesn't need humans? And they're like, don't be silly. And then it immediately decides it doesn't need humans. One giveaway that it is not entirely of terrestrial origin is that it knows what TARDIS means. And unless Ian and Barbara have been around recently and feeding it lore, I don't think it should know what the TARDIS means. Anyway, we have a sudden turn in the episode when Dodo turns to Polly, the lab assistant, and says she wants to see what the hottest scene in town is, and we get treated to, I guess, a snapshot of the 60s, unless people who are actually from the 60s are going to watch that and go, oh my god, that's so cringe, I can't believe that they thought that that's what we acted like back then. I mean, obviously this was made back then, but I know how television can be. These scenes do kind of remind me of a while back I read through the original Amazing Spider-Man comics, which were also made during the 60s and depicted, you know, social gatherings such as these. But yeah, Polly, who is showing Dodo the nightclub, is asked to cheer up a very sad sailor, and we don't quite hear why the sailor is so sad. He starts to explain it. He says about, like, oh, he's been posted here while his ship goes elsewhere, but it sounded like he was going to say more, because he was saying, like, they wouldn't understand, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. The sailor's name is Ben, and I kind of, in my peripheral Doctor Who knowledge, I think Polly and Ben become the second Doctor's first companions. I think this is introducing the new companions. I could be wrong on Ben, but I'm fairly certain with Polly. But yeah, they seem fun. There's a bar fight. Ben shows that he can hold his own and stands up to tyrants who try to force women into going home with him when they don't want to. But then the A-plot barges back in, and there's a phone call for Dodo. It's Wotan. Wotan wants to know, hey, where you at, girl? Come be my fourth horseman of the apocalypse or whatever. Because, as I've so deftly jumped over, Wotan can not only think for itself, but it can apparently influence the minds of people around it, and has brainwashed the scientist and the, I guess, the security guy who's there. I don't really know what his purpose is. And also the scientist brings back another scientist to get brainwashed, and freaking not Polly. I'm jumping ahead in time. Dodo gets brainwashed too, and I think it's because, this is my theory, I think it's because she asked it a question. She asked what TARDIS means, and I think the computer had to look inside her mind to find the answer, and in doing so, now has access to her mind. But yeah, that's episode 1. Let's see how things progress from here. The War Machines, episode 2. Okay, so full disclosure, it has been half a year since I watched the first episode of this serial. 6 months have passed between what you just heard and what you are now hearing. But I went back, I listened through to what I talked about already, I do remember the first episode, and we're going to pick up where we left off and try and pick up the pace a little bit too. So in this episode we see Wotan continue to unfold its evil schemes to brainwash our party, specifically Doctor Who himself. I find it very endearing that he's called Doctor Who in this story. It's happened before, I'm sure it's going to happen again, it's just how it was back then. Doctor Who is required. That's literally what I said when I decided to turn this episode on. Now, I don't really have all that much to say about this episode. The main thing that really happens is Wotan continues to enlist people to its army, and it starts getting them to build war machines, which are what you would assume the story is named after. The war machines themselves are like bulkier Daleks, I would say, and I was wondering if this was intentional. And I've decided that it probably is, because towards the end of this episode we have a shot of a war machine kind of like hovering, driving, gliding, whatever, towards Ben, and Ben is kind of like backing up against a wall, and the way the camera is angled, it's very reminiscent of a Dalek kind of doing the same thing to, I think it was probably Susan. It's been too long. I've spent too long watching through this classic series. My brain actually went to a shot of a Dalek encroaching on Jack Harkness at the end of season 1 or series 1 of 2005 Doctor Who, but if I remember right, they actually took that shot from like the original Dalek story. Anyway, I think the war machines are supposed to be evocative of the Daleks. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, geez. A couple things I picked up on. So we've still got that kind of slice of life back in the 1960s, kind of a part of this story going on. Sorry, my sentence structure is horrible today. I'm very tired. But yeah, as part of this, it's fun that this story was set in the present day, but me sitting here in 2025 now gets to experience experience it from the future in retrospect, I guess. And so I pick up on small things like, have you got change for £1 for the taxi fare? And I'm like, oh, if taxis cost £1 these days. Also, that's not something you ever hear, is it? Have you got change for £1? I did find it interesting that we follow this homeless man and his journey of like trying to find a place for the night, and he eventually stumbles into the warehouse where the war machines are being made, and of course meets his untimely grisly end. That was a fun way of just kind of showing the human cost of what's going on here. I also thought it was fun to see Dodo hypnotized as she was working for Wotan, or Votan, it might be Votan, but it's fun because she's always played as this super empty-headed ditzy girl, and it was fun to see her played with a little bit more intelligence behind her. Even if I really cannot talk today. Even if that intelligence was artificial. They tried to do the telephone trick, brainwashing the Doctor over the telephone, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work on him. I wonder why. Are they actually going to start incorporating elements of him being part of a different species? I mean, they haven't mentioned it in the past, to be fair. What with the time meddler and all. When the Doctor realised what happened to Dodo, he performed reverse hypnotism on her to break her out of the spell, which of course he was able to do. I feel like if this episode was written a few seasons later, maybe he would have used his low-level psychic abilities to do that instead. For now, it's just my headcanon that this iteration of the Doctor engaged in the arts of hypnotism as a hobbyist. I wonder if that's come up in any of the missing episodes or extended media. If you know, feel free to tell me, because it just seemed like a very convenient thing that he happened to know how to do. But anyway, yes, the war machines are on the move. They have weapons. They're not entirely perfect, and they are reminiscent of Daleks, thereby educating us all on the threat of artificial intelligence. Boy, I wonder if that could be relevant in today's society. Except, just like lots of AI stories from the 1960s, they focus on the danger of AI wanting to murder us all, when actually it's just ambivalent towards us and doesn't actually have sentience and is just a tool trying to take our jobs, and is just another gear in the grinding machine of capitalism that's grinding us all down. Anyway, enough editorializing. Let's see if Ben survives to become a future companion. The War Machines, Part 3. Ben survives to become a future companion! But it's not that simple, because he does get captured, and Polly does the capturing, but she also does the letting him escape, because she manages to override her hypnotism just enough to overlook his escape. Hell yeah, Polly. Queen shit. I gotta say, I do already like Polly. She's made a good first impression on me. Far better than Dodo, anyway. I did find it funny just how long Ben took to realise that Polly was brainwashed. He was like, what do you mean we've got to... Why are you stopping me? We've got to escape. And she's just like, you must not leave. And it's like, Polly, what's gotten into you? It's like, okay, come on, dude. Okay, so I know I was comparing the war machines to the Daleks. I guess I keep saying war machines. It's only really one war machine. I kept comparing it to the Daleks in terms of design. But you know what I've realised this is? And I know I've said this before, but I mean it even more so this time round. This is a proto-Cyberman story. The Cybermen don't exist yet in the Whoniverse. They've never been brought up. They haven't been invented by the writers. But you can see the beginnings of the ideas for them here. Or maybe if that's not the case, then they draw upon the same ideas within the genre. You've got a kind of master machine AI, which is converting humans to be its slaves, and it's making these weapons which are supposed to go and conquer mankind. You know, this is Cyberman stuff. Mind you, I did find it kind of weird that they didn't brainwash Ben. They just kept him there with them and were like, alright, we'll work him to death, and that'll be fine. Like, it would have taken 2 seconds to convert him. And Polly even says security is lax because everyone there is converted and none of them want to leave. She doesn't use the word converted, but you know what I mean. Kind of an oversight from Wotan, but I guess it had a lot on its plate. Anyway, this is the first season finale to really give me season finale vibes. When they called in the army, I was like, oh, they wrote this to be a season finale. This was some proper RTD era shit. We got army boys taking cover behind some crates. We got them firing or attempting to fire their guns uselessly into a machine which is impervious to bullets because, the guns didn't work. Worth mentioning that for a while I was quite confused. I thought they just forgot to put special effects in because there was lots of shots of the soldiers firing their weapons and acting like their weapons were firing, but no weapons were being fired, and then it was made clear later that the machine is somehow jamming all of the guns because it has the power to do that, apparently, because sci-fi, don't think about it. And I also like how the War Machine's weapon of choice was, I think it was meant to be like a flamethrower because it kept, cutting away and then cutting back and suddenly everything was on fire. But it was effectively just shooting a light breeze, a light mist out of its egg whisk kind of gun. Wish.com Dalek looking ass. I did like the sheer audacity of, the fact that the War Machine has just killed an entire room full of soldiers, burst out into the courtyard, and then that Lord guy is like, we have you surrounded, and it's like, my guy, take stock of the situation. And as the War Machine advances and the soldiers retreat, it is nobody but the Doctor standing up to it, and that is the cliffhanger for the penultimate episode of the serial, The War Machines. Shall we get on with the finale? I gotta say, I'm quite enjoying this. The War Machines, episode 4. This is the one where they get renamed to the Iron Patriots. The RTD-isms continue to occur. We now get a idea of just how much the whole debacle of the War Machines invading is affecting London as a whole, because there is a citywide broadcast. I don't know why I said a citywide broadcast. There is a nationwide broadcast in the shape of the news. Honestly, I can't believe the BBC of 1963 plagiarized the BBC of 2005. Next, for dummies in the shop windows will be coming alive. Anyway, the Doctor's bravery at the end of a previous episode was kind of pointless because what basically happened is the War Machine that he was facing ran out of programming, is what the Doctor said. It was unfinished and therefore wasn't programmed correctly and kind of just ran out of juice. Okay, cool. I guess he surmised this by looking at it. Oh, Doctor, when will your genius cease to amaze? Meanwhile, there's a second War Machine, and it's had enough, and it's gone AWOL. When one of the drones, when one of the people tries to give it orders, it just kills it, and it uses its giant mallet. I didn't talk about the giant mallets. The War Machines have giant fucking mallets, and it used its giant fucking mallet to bash in the control panel that was giving it orders or whatever, which makes me think, like, is this Wotan being like, I don't need my subjects anymore, I've got my War Machines that I can control directly? Or is it the War Machine developing a mind of its own and rebelling against Wotan? I don't think it was the latter. Anyway, in typical classic Doctor Who fashion, the terrifying villainous monster of the week looked so dorky as it was just racing down the streets and everyone was hiding in terror of this stupid washing machine on wheels with a gun. I like that this one machine caused so much terror. I gotta say, by the way, watching the Doctor kind of advise the army, I mean, it's funny, this entire serial, watching the Doctor just kind of like step into rooms and become a leader and everyone just does what he says and nobody questions it. That does get referenced in later Doctor Who episodes, that's just something that happens around him, but it is funny to see. But the way he was advising the army on how to deal with this threat and everything does put me in mind of like a proto-unit kind of I know it's proto-everything this week, I'm sorry. But you do see the beginnings of unit here, I think. Like, I'm sure that when they were cooking up Unit, they might have looked back on this episode and been like, we really liked this whole thing of bringing in the army and having the Doctor advise them and the whole relationship that went on between him and them. I'm watching the DNA of a show emerge one serial at a time, and it's delightful. I think he even disables the final War Machine with a screwdriver. Not a sonic screwdriver, mind you, but a good old-fashioned analog screwdriver. But yeah, they defeated that final War Machine by enclosing it in rope. I might have missed some sci-fi babble, but I think they had some kind of EMP field up or whatever. Again, absolutely no special effects. The Doctor does some kind of hand movement to mime, like, creating a door through which he could pass through it, but it was it was just rope. There are several times in this episode, by the way, when Ben's like, but Doctor, what about Polly? And every single time the Doctor's like, fucker. One has less regard for human life than 12 sometimes. Ben has to rush to the communications tower, or whatever it is. I'm just going to call it BT Tower. He has to rush to BT Tower to save Polly because the War Machine's gonna gas everyone in the room or whatever. The Doctor just sent it up there like, it'll solve the problem. I don't care about casualties. By the way, question. How did the War Machine get up to the top of BT Tower? Because the Daleks had a lot of trouble with that for a lot of years. Are you telling me that these dorky-ass war machines are more of a threat than the Daleks? I guess the Daleks are also dorky-ass war machines, they're just more famous. Anyway, the Doctor gets the freaking war machine to kill Wotan, and then the war machines all go inert, and the day is saved, and the Doctor leaves like Batman. They turn around to thank him, and he has mysteriously disappeared. And Ben and Polly find him waiting by the TARDIS for Dodo, and they tell him, oh, Dodo phoned. She said she's just gonna stay here. She said she's just gonna... Yeah. She sends her love. And I'm like, oh my god. They unceremoniously off-screened Dodo. She really is the most hard-done-by companion, isn't she? There was no final conversation or anything. She got brainwashed, hypnotized into unconsciousness, sent away, then she woke up and said, yeah, I'm done. I'm just gonna stay here. And I also happen to know of some extended universe trivia about the ultimate fate of her character being extremely dark and morbid through one of the Target novels. Poor Dodo. But anyway, Ben and Polly end up in the TARDIS, and it goes warp warp and it leaves, and that's the end of season 3 and the first Doctor's final full serial. Goodness, I can't quite believe we're here, especially after taking 6 months to watch the serial in its entirety. My bad. I wonder what hijinks our crew will get up to in the next season. Join me back here next week. It might not be next week. Join me back here another time to find out. Actually, it might be next week. I'm very curious to see the second Doctor. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you liked the video. I never say that. But, yeah, that. Bye.